Hi, I'm Nora Duncan, State Director for AARP Connecticut. Welcome to another episode of Coffee and Tea with AARP Connecticut, an interview series on the issues important to people 50 plus in Connecticut and their families. Today, we're going to preview the 2025 legislative session with John Erlingheuser and Natalie Shurtleff, who lead our advocacy efforts here in the state. With the help of our amazing volunteers, of course. John, let's start with you. What are the dates for the session, and what's the difference between a long session and a short session?
Well, good morning, everybody, and good morning, Nora and Natalie, and thank you for having me on today. And that's a good question. So this legislature meets every year, and we have what we call the long session and the short session. And coming up January 8th, we convene the long session. And the purpose of the long session is really to create the state budget. We do a 2-year budget, and the session will adjourn June 4th if all goes as planned. And anything that's not worked on or completed by the 4th of June will die and potentially get taken up in the even numbered year. In the even numbered year, which is when the legislative elections take place, they have what they call the short session, and that goes from February to May. And really, the only mandate for that short session is to make any adjustments that are needed in the second year of the 2-year budget. But it turns out that usually everything that they want to do that didn't get done in the previous year seems to be resurrected in the short session. But we are going to be in the long session. And so, there is more time to things and the ability to put more meat on the bone when it comes to the priorities that I know we're going to touch upon today. So we're looking forward to a long legislative session and a productive one, some new faces, new committee chairs. And so it's going to be really interesting for the staff and the volunteers to get some stuff done this year.
Okay, great. So, you talked about budget in the long session. So let's talk about the budgets for the people who live in Connecticut, their household budgets, pocketbook issues.
Yep.
In 2024, electric rates skyrocketed. We heard from so many people about it. I know the answer to why that happened is complicated, but maybe you can explain that to us, and then talk a little bit about what you anticipate the legislature might do to help contain the high cost of utilities.
Yeah, it's a good question. And, we all have a long history of AARP Connecticut working on utilities issues, particularly because we do pay amongst the highest rates in the continental U.S. And as you pointed out, this summer, electric rates skyrocketed. And, there's two components of the bill. There's delivery, and then there's generation. And the generation portion of electric bills is deregulated. The delivery portion is regulated. But what transpired was this huge jump in what's called the public benefits charge, which kind of encompasses a whole host of things, including low-income programs, energy efficiency programs. But then there's also another component to it, which was the bailout of the Millstone nuclear power plant, which we opposed 7 years ago and literally said, hey, this is going to be a subsidy of a profitable nuclear power plant, and it's going to impact people's rates, and rates are going to go up. And people said, no, that won't happen. This is going to be great. It's going to be in the best interest of the ratepayers. Well, lo and behold, when the Utility Regulatory Authority finally agreed to pay the money that was owed to the utilities, who were required by law to get into a contract with Millstone, all of a sudden that was dumped into the public benefits charge, and the bill went up. And it went up at a time in July when, usage is very high. And, the amount you pay in public benefits charges is based on the amount of electricity you use. So we had record high temperatures in July. You had this subsidy coming to fruition, and people's bills went through the roof, and nobody seemed to know why, although a lot of people put the blame on low-income programs because of the tidal public benefits charges. And there's a component of that, but that's literally pennies on the dollar in terms of how it impacts ratepayers, whereas the Millstone bailout is like 70% of that increase. So, everybody is running around kind of with their hair on fire saying we have to do something, we have to do something. And frankly, we do need to do something. The question is what? And that's not an easy thing to answer. So, we have a rule of thumb when it comes to utilities issues at AARP, which is first, do no harm, because quite frequently, they're always trying to address the issue, and frequently they make it worse than better. So we want to make sure that we get at this in a way that actually helps ratepayers contain costs, but also not harm, the important components of that public benefit that we need. There are people that have protection from shut off because of their illnesses or are low income, and we can't have low and moderate income seniors going without electricity in the summer when they need air conditioning or heating in the winter, which puts their health and safety at risk. So we're going to work with all the parties involved and try to see what some of the best ideas are that can actually impact ratepayers but not make the problem worse. And that's easier said than done. So, we're going to roll up our sleeves and make sure we're in the fight, and to make sure that, we can get people to work together and hopefully do something to address high electric rates.
Yeah, first do no harm. Okay, we'll go with that and see where the first couple weeks of session take us with the proposals that come in, and hopefully we come up with something
Sure.
workable at the end.
And you know what? Rates are going to change again July 1 because the new standard service rate is going to come out. So it's also important for people to check their electric rates to make sure if they're using a third-party supplier, they're not paying more than the standard offer, or if they are, they should think about going back to standard offer and or switching to another supplier. So people should really pay attention to their electric bills monthly and not just open it and pay it. Really check and examine your bills.
And the rates change every January 1 and every July 1. So those are
Correct.
really important. People should mark their calendars to make sure that they are taking a look to make sure they're not paying more than they need to pay.
Absolutely.
All right. Speaking of pocketbook issues, Natalie, we know the high cost of prescription drugs it's a major financial burden for many people in Connecticut. So what will AARP be doing to drive down the cost of prescription drugs?
Yeah, just to start out, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me this morning. Yeah, so prescription drug costs are incredibly expensive for many people and can be a real burden on household budget. So we're going to be working on addressing the issue, and we actually kicked off last week. We're taking part in a bipartisan, bicameral task force being led by 4 legislators, 2 senators, 2 representatives, both Democrats and Republicans, along with other advocacy organizations, AARP is part of it, and industry as well. And this task force is going to be meeting over the next several weeks to look at coming together and coming up with some real solutions to address the high cost of prescription drugs. So we're going to be an active part of that task force. And hopefully at the end of it, we're going to have some legislation that we can get behind and get passed this year to really take a bite out of this issue for folks. We know that if we don't address the high cost of prescription drugs, too many people can't afford them. And oftentimes that means that they're not taking their medication the way that they need to. They're either skipping medications, not refilling medications, and that can lead to some really devastating health outcomes.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that, this task force will be meeting. It's going to be a lot of time, and there's a lot of opinions in the room.
Yes.
So no foregone conclusions at this point in time about what kind of legislation will come out of the multiple committees that are going to be looking at different buckets of expenses and parts of the system. So Natalie, let's continue with you. Last month, Governor Lamont proclaimed November as Family Caregivers Month in Connecticut. So when we're looking forward to January in 2025, what will AARP be working on to support unpaid family caregivers?
Got another pocketbook issue here. We know that family caregivers provide such critical support for their loved ones, and oftentimes that comes with expenses. Family caregivers are really the backbone of our care system here in Connecticut, but they often have to spend their own money doing things like hiring care support, making modifications to their home, a whole host of different different expenses that they have to pay out of pocket. And so we're looking to do a tax credit that will help offset some of those costs and help make sure that people can afford to be a family caregiver. And we know that in the long run, it's going to be a cost savings because it's going to keep people at home rather than in a nursing home where they may not want to be. And that's going to ultimately save some money down the road. And we know that one of our key priorities this year, as we're trying to highlight the need for this legislation, is going to be highlighting the stories of family caregivers and really sharing the role that they play in supporting older individuals in Connecticut.
Yeah, I mean, taxpayers in many cases, if not most cases, end up paying for people to be in nursing homes through Medicaid. So the longer we can keep people where they want to be at home, the less expensive it is to taxpayers. And so, yeah, I think this is a great time to start gathering stories and telling those stories about what people are doing. 420,000 unpaid family caregivers in Connecticut to keep their loved ones at home where they really want to be. All right, John, let's switch gears. Last year, or I guess it was this year, it was 2024. So last session, there was a movement to open up Connecticut's financial system to something called earned wage advances. Can you talk about what happened with these products last session and why we oppose treating them differently than other loan products?
Well, that's a good question, and was something that took up a lot of work in the last legislative session in 2024. And basically what happened is the state of Connecticut Department of Banking determined that these were actually loans and should be regulated as such. We don't have payday lending in Connecticut. We're one of the states that have very good banking regulations that protect consumers. But this is, in essence, an end run around those kind of statutes. And what the industry tried to do was have them declared not to be loans and not be regulated as such. Now, though, so what these basically are is companies that either through your employer or direct to the consumer. I'm sure people see the commercials from Chime and all these other places. Oh, get access to your pay in advance and no cost. And they make a lot of claims that just simply aren't true. And in fact, you find people that utilize this service up to 30 to 40 to 50 times a year because they're constantly having to, borrow and work and pay, to pay back the money that they've advanced themselves. And it's really not, what people think. I mean, they claim that it's accessing your own money when it's not. They estimate what your pay may be and they make you a loan. And then, some of these claim to have free options, except, I went through the system one time with one of these companies to test it out. And at least 14 to 15 times throughout the transaction, they ask you to quote unquote tip them a money. And they literally do it in such a way that makes you feel like you wouldn't be able to get the advance unless you quote unquote paid them a tip. And now the companies will make a claim that people are really utilizing this product because it saves them money because they don't end up getting insufficient fund fees or bounced check fees. But what we find is that they're just being turned into this cycle of debt, never-ending debt, and they're working to pay off the debt that they're borrowing all the time. And so this is, we have the gold standard in Connecticut. We regulate these products. We should continue to do such. We were successful in beating this back last year. It's a product that preys particularly on the low income and African American and Latino populations especially. Now, what do we do? Well, if they don't have access to this product, what we need to do is really try to help those that are unbanked, people that don't have access to banking. And that's a problem. And so we're going to work on hopefully some legislation to help people become accessible to banking products at low or no cost to them, as opposed to this predatory product, which in essence is just a payday loan by another name. And, the industry keeps fighting back because, they are making these claims all over the country that they're not loans, and yet our statute says they are a loan. And they do not want that because, again, they're trying to find another way to skin the cat and be able to do this predatory lending that they are not currently able to do. And so, I feel sympathetic for the people that don't have access to banking, but by the same token, they shouldn't be put in this predatory situation. So, we work with a lot of different organizations, the Center for Responsible Lending, Consumer Reports, Connecticut Citizens Action, all kinds of consumers, labor unions, AFL-CIO, who oppose these products because of the harm they do to folks. And so we're going to continue that fight, but by the same token, we're going to try to find some solutions for people that need access to banking.
Great. Thanks, John. Yeah, it was a tough one last session on that. So, John, it kind of leads into my next question. AARP does a lot of work on fraud preventions and areas of consumer protections, all arenas really across the board, with utilities, banking, energy in general, solar. So when you're thinking about the upcoming session, what are some of the issues you think we'll be working on regarding consumer protections and fraud prevention in 2025?
Yeah, it's a good question. And we do an awful lot of work as an organization around fraud in general. We have our Fraud Watch Network, a group of volunteers that are out there helping people ensure they don't get taken advantage of through the various schemes that are out there. And we work very closely with a lot of people. So, we anticipate there's going to be major legislation this year on artificial intelligence. That's something that is really kind of on the front burner, not the back burner. And so we're going to make sure that we have strong protections and support efforts to really combat the use of artificial intelligence to scam older Americans, right? Every great new technology that's meant to do good, there's always some bad actors out there that want to utilize that for the wrong reasons. And so we want to make sure that, if AI is going to be addressed in Connecticut, that it's done in such a way that protects older people from being scammed. Financial fraud is a big issue with all of this new cryptocurrency out there. People are now being scammed through crypto. Go down to your local gas station and there's a cryptocurrency ATM and take out some money and crypto and send it to me here, and I'll help get your grandchild out of jail because he was arrested last night. These types of things. So it's a big topic. We're going to work very closely with the Department of Banking and others to try to deal with this kind of crypto fraud. And again, we want to make sure that we have people can have access to safe banking, protection from excessive fees, non-sufficient fund fees, and over the limit draft fees and things like that are critical. And we want to make sure people aren't taking advantage of things through the institutions. It's not always just fraudulent. I mean, there are some institutions that take advantage of people, and we want to make sure that people are not. So we're going to put a lot of energy and effort into just a whole array of different areas around consumer protection. And then you did mention we're always working. There's currently a task force on solar, door-to-door solar sales to make sure people are actually getting what they're told when they come to your door. So we're working on that as well. There'll probably be some legislation on that. And then, around third-party electric suppliers, there's always, every time we plug some holes in the system that people get taken advantage of, it's like I call it the game of whack-a-mole. They figure out another way to kind of take advantage of people. So, we're going to have our hands full, but we're going to keep at it. We're always trying to be one step ahead of the fraudsters.
Yeah, we try. These fraudsters are good. And I think people would be surprised to realize how many crypto ATMs there really are out there. So just Google crypto ATM near me, and I guarantee anybody watching is going to find one in their town. It was really surprising to me when I figured out how many actually were around, and there's just more and more. So anyway, all right. So to the both of you, but I'll start with Natalie. Anything else that you expect to come up this session that we haven't covered?
Yeah, another pocketbook issue. But that's a theme here. Housing. I definitely expect housing affordability to come up. It falls under our livable communities work. So we're going to be working to make sure that people have affordable housing in communities that they can walk and be safe and really thrive in. So we're going to be paying attention to what's going on there and working to support policies that will help ensure affordable housing for everyone in Connecticut.
Thanks. Thank you. And John, what about you? Anything we didn't cover?
I mean, I think we covered a lot of territory, but I'll just say, being a budget year and having the fiscal guardrails that are in place that kind of limit what can happen in the state government in terms of spending, because, even though the money may be there, we have these protections and restrictions that are built in that make things difficult. We're going to have to kind of look at everything and make sure that all of the good work we've done on all of the areas we've talked about in the past are protected. And that includes things like people's retirement income and making sure that they're not taxed unfairly when it comes to retirement income. And certainly, property tax is always an issue that comes up, and we want to make sure we develop a system in Connecticut where it's fair and equitable taxation of property so that, you're not living in, particularly when it comes to automobiles, you could have a jalopy and live in Hartford or Bridgeport or New Haven and pay more for in car taxes, property taxes on that vehicle than somebody with a Mercedes who lives in Westport or Fairfield, because of the way there is this inequitable system. So I expect a lot to come up, and I know it's going to be a busy year, but we have a great team with Natalie and you and everybody else and all of the volunteers. So I anticipate we'll have some good results for our members.
Yeah, and it's been a while since we had to worry about budget cuts, but the Medicare savings program, the home and community-based services line items, we're going to have to watch all of those core services that people rely on, the Alzheimer's respite. I mean, there's really a lot that help people stay at home, help people, help caregivers, and we've had to fight those battles before, and I'm hoping we don't have to again. I know there's nothing legislators like less than hearing about the Medicare savings program being cut. So I'll remind anybody watching about how much they don't like those phone calls when they come in. Natalie, what can folks do to support priorities that we're working on?
Yeah, I mean, I think that where people can, making their voices heard, sharing their stories. I talked a little bit before about the value of stories in our caregiving work and really highlighting the work that family caregivers do, but in all of the issues that we're working on, in prescription drugs, in some of the energy work that John's working on, having stories from people that are experiencing these things can be incredibly valuable. So we're always looking for more volunteers to join us and to talk with lawmakers, share their stories throughout the legislative process. We really guide you along the way. But one easy way you can get involved right now on the caregiving tax credit is we have a pledge. So you can add your name to the pledge. It's just like a petition, sign it online, and voice your support for our caregiver tax credit. And with that, you'll start getting information about our efforts throughout the legislative session, so you can really stay involved and learn more about the work that we're doing. So I encourage you to do it right now and scan this QR code to take that action, and hopefully join us in the upcoming legislative session to get this work done.
Great. Thank you so much. It's going to be a busy 2025, so rest up, you two. And I'm excited to see our Army of Red Shirts back at the state capitol, working in everything from giving testimony to meeting with their legislators to, lobbying committees and taking part in the process. It's really great. And remember, anybody can easily join us as an e-advocate and help us advance policies important to the 50 plus in Connecticut. You can just go ahead and scan that QR code. So thanks again, and everyone have a happy new year, and we'll see you bright and early in January at the legislative session.